On today's episode of Did You Know with Dan Anderson, I'm going to show you how to stop a miter cut for an apron before it cuts into a straight seam.
Our challenge to making a miter on the inside corner is to get it to stop in the correct location along the flat edge. So we'll need to create some interference in that location. There are a few different ways to do this. We'll run through them quickly. We'll start by drawing our seam line. I'm going to draw a line starting at the inside corner and going parallel to this edge, pulling it up past the back edge. And now I can choose Cut, and then select my seam line as my cutting geometry, and then select the perimeter of the countertop as the geometry to be cut. And because I left a nice long tail on my original seam line, I can easily delete it. And before I move the part, I'll offset its end towards the inside. I can make this distance a very small amount. I'll use 0.01 or 10 thousandths. And I'll make sure I have line or arc and offset as geometry selected. And I'll carefully select the end of this top and offset it towards its inside. Now I can move this part and its features off to the right, being careful that I don't select the line that I just offset. We're going to use that line to make a small protrusion. So I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to start at this end and then go perpendicular to this line. And now we can explode, trim, and delete, and fill it to close gaps. Our objective being to make a continuous, closed perimeter with a bump to create interference to stop the saw from going past that point. Now when we apply an apron to that edge, we can see that the apron and the cut lines stop at the interference point that we created. And when we apply tool paths to our part, we can see that the center of the saw blade stops short as well. The distance depends on the saw blade's diameter that you're using. And here's another way to draw a protrusion for interference. Draw the seam line as we did before and use Cut to separate our countertop into the two pieces. Then move the parts away from each other and delete the original seam line. Here you can either draw a rectangle 10 thousandths of an inch wide in the depth of our countertop, or I'm going to use the backsplash button to create mine. I'll change my backsplash height to 10 thousandths or 0.01, and then I'll select this end of the countertop as a single edge to apply the backsplash to. And now when I zoom in, we'll see we have a very skinny rectangle, which we're going to move against the other rectangle to create our interference bump. By choosing Move, selecting our rectangle, and then the endpoint of this top left corner, and moving it to the endpoint of this top right corner on our countertop. Now I can unite the two rectangles together. We'll find Unite on the Edit tab. When chosen, we're prompted to select the overlapping geometries. So I'll select the two neighboring rectangles and finish. And I'll be left with only the outline of what used to be the two rectangles. And if I zoom in, I'll be able to see that we have the 10 thou protrusion as we did before. And if we apply an apron, we see it stops where it should, and when we auto toolpath, we see the blade stops as well. Another option that we have to create interference for the blade is to rotate the seam line before we cut the countertop. I drew this seam line just like before. And if I use the distance angle utility to measure it, I'll see that this line is currently drawn to an angle of 90 degrees. And when I choose to rotate, I'll want to carefully select this end of the line as my base point. And since I'm going to rotate this line clockwise, it will be a negative degree. And I'll rotate a very small amount, maybe 0.1. So I'll type in negative 0.1. And then I'll OK the one copy. 1/10 of a degree is a very small amount which we can hardly see. I'll just measure this to show that it did rotate. And now I can go and cut the countertop as normal. And then we can move the parts away from each other and delete the original seam line. And this slight angle protruding from the part will cause enough interference to stop the apron, which will also stop the blade if we have Simplify Wall Scans turned off or unchecked. And as we see, this method also results in the miters stopping in the correct location.
Thank you for watching. Now you know what I know. One more thing. Did you know that we have hundreds of resources available on our website for machine training and service? To find them, go to parkindustries.com. Thank you for choosing Park Industries.